Hello and welcome back to the channel. We got a new guest today, joined by Zach. Thanks for coming on to talk about XTC. Interesting discography. I guess a little bit of context. Zach and I and another friend of ours were deep diving XTC very slowly. It initially was one album a week, um, and then it slowed down even more towards the end. So we kind of had been like exchanging notes, but to be honest, most of your list I don't remember. So when we agreed to do this, I I was like, well, it'll be more a surprise for the audience than it will be for us about each other's list. But now that I'm like trying to think, I'm like, what is your list going to be? So yeah, what was your like familiarity with them going in before doing that?
Yeah, I had a pretty low familiarity, honestly. Um, I mean, I'd seen their albums around like music ranking sites and stuff, but there's a lot of bands that I have connections with because like my parents were into them or I had friends into them. This is a band that really nobody I knew, was a big fan of or anything like that. So I kind of approached this blind. Um, but I'd heard a couple songs and I kind of dig them, and I kind of was curious as well about kind of hearing about their path from being like a post-punk band, but then later having like Beatles sounds, and I thought that sounded very interesting to maybe track how that happened. So that's kind of why I decided to do it, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I think yeah, I guess we'll get into it. In a sense that it was less that it was like a progression and more that like something clicked in Andy Partridge's head and he was like, I want to make this kind of music now. And then this completely changed. But yeah, so we have 14 albums to rank. I'm gonna kick us off. We are gonna do just one each. I don't think we need to speed run through the bottom four. Um, so my number 14 is The Big Express from 1984. Um, Pretty easy bottom album, really. It's the only album of theirs where there were pretty much no songs that I took away from it. Um, I think it's interesting conceptually what they were trying to do. They're going for this like grand concept album type thing about like British life, which is a thing that is a lot, very, very prevalent in a lot of their lyrics anyway. Um, but the production here is not good. Like Todd Rundgren came on for the album after with Skylarking, and he said that he listened to this album and was like, "Yeah, I hated how that album sounded," and like they had to start from square one, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of like bizarre songs like "Shake You Donkey Up," even for XTC is like so strange. Yeah, just the everyday story of small town almost sounds like a sitcom intro in parts. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, there's not much here that I'm really like that in love with. I like I Remember the Sun actually, quite loungy, quite sort of calm. I think that was a Collins song, which I have an interesting relationship in terms of like the Partridge versus Molding songwriting, which I'll get into probably with later albums. But yeah, pretty chaotic, pretty messy. I've got it as a 6 out of 10, probably generous. Now I'm saying it out loud, but yeah, it's quite self-indulgent. It's a low six. I'm not really going to go back to this one. So yeah, Big Express is my number 14.
Yeah, I don't have that one yet, but I don't think that's a crazy opinion. Um, but we're starting at a six, and I think that shows it's pretty much everything this band is at least pretty decent, and I enjoyed pretty much every album at least a good bit, and I think that was a little bit of a struggle really to think of exactly what album I wanted at the bottom because I do enjoy them all to a certain extent. But I settled on Go To as my number 14. It's 14, right? Yeah. um, so, and as I think people will find, I don't dislike the early era of the band, but for some reason, this album just does not excite me a whole lot, and I think that's just what it comes down to. There's plenty of fine material. Opens with Mechanic Dancing, which kind of has a Carsy feel. They had that kind of like nerdy new wave vibe in this early period. And they really go into that here, where the songs that they feel just kind of nerdy and quirky, and it just maybe a little too much on some of this material. The first few songs, we get into a whole string of songs by Colin Moulding, and I think that's a big theme of this whole discography is the Partridge songs and the Moulding songs. It's a lot fewer Moulding songs, but they tend to be pretty good, and that's the case here. I like Buzz City Talking and Crowded Room. They're both they kind of have like a weirdness that some like almost like John Entwistle like, and so I like that. I feel like this album fizzles out, and the second half is especially weak. There's at least 3 songs that I at least personally don't like very much at all. Life is Good in the Greenhouse I just find incredibly boring. And then there's 2 songs by keyboardist Barry Andrews, who was in the early part of the band but dropped out pretty soon thereafter, and I'm just not really into either of those songs. There is a kind of a fun one on the second half, Jumping in Gomorrah. I like that one, but there's nothing I really love, and yeah, it's fine. There's some cool cuts, but just on the whole, it just leaves me the lowest impression of the bunch. So 6 as well, or at least starting at a 6 as well for Go To.
Yeah, again, it's not next for me, but it won't be long before I'm talking about that one. Unfortunately, I think this is where we're going to divide a little bit. My number 13 is White Music, which is the debut album, right? If I remember correctly.
Oh yeah,
it's the same year as Go To, and yeah, this to me they're still trying to figure themselves out as a band here, and they're very much like a part of a movement rather than doing their own thing at this point. But you know, it's definitely better than the Big Express. It sounds better, and they're in Statue of Liberty. It has a pretty knockout, pretty great song. And yeah, the keyboard on that is amazing. The hook is just like bonkers. It's so fun. Yeah, but there's just some weird choices here, like the All Along the Watchtower cover. It drags a little bit. It's not great. I think Cross Wires kind of sucks. I don't mind This Is Pop. Was This Is Pop? Question mark. Has a cool hook. Pretty cool sound. I don't know. I was listening to this and I was kind of like thinking about other bands of this era, like you mentioned, like the Cars and Talking Heads and what have you. More my kind of thing than what XTC were doing on the very, very early stuff. I think their third album is where they really announced themselves, so I won't be talking about that one for a while yet. But yeah, mainly the overall sound of the album and Statue of Liberty take it above the Big Express. I give it a strong 6. It's nearly a 7. And it's my last 6. So I think XTC have a lot of good albums. Yeah, I quite like White Music. I think it's all right, you know.
Yep, I mean, I knew from our exchanges that you had it around here. Won't be talking about that one for quite some time. So now I'm going to probably upset some XTC fans for sure, because my number 13 is Oranges and Lemons. And why I say upset is I feel like this is one of their maybe biggest commercial albums. I didn't really look at the like stats or anything, but there's a couple songs on here that are probably among the most well-known XTC songs. Mayor of Simpleton is probably one of their biggest tracks, and I like that song. I think it's got a very catchy jingle pop hook. Feels a little bit more sanitized than some of their other stuff around this period, but I still like it. And then, you know, there's several Colin Moulding songs here I like, including one that was a hit, which was King for a Day, which I think has a really cool kind of beat to it. Very interesting. This is a very long album, 4 sides of an LP. And this is just kind of during an era where I feel like they did make their albums a little too long. And I think furthermore, there's a lot of stuff I just don't like on here. The big thing is I feel like, you know, Todd Rundgren did a great job with skylarking on the production. And I feel like when Andy Partridge has a lot of control, even though he never fully produced an album, you can hear that he puts like tons and tons of elements on these songs. And it just kind of gets to be a nuisance to the ear. And I really don't like it. So here I feel like the producer is kind of a no-name that didn't do much else, and I kind of feel like Partridge had his way with a lot of the material. So opens up with the Garden of Earthly Delights, and this is just a prime example of that for me. I just find it just really tough to listen to because there's just so much weird stuff going on, and it just really doesn't ground itself anywhere. There's a bunch of kind of like weird political songs on here that I don't quite feel like work. Here Comes President Kill Again. Scarecrow People is okay. It just, yeah, I feel like he's almost posturing more for the attitude than actually trying to say something sincere. Some of these, the Loving just sounds very Beatles-like, and I just feel like they do that a little bit better when they're not so trying to do a rip-off. And then a few songs at the end, you know, Pink Thing is like about his penis, and I just think it's one of the worst things in this entire catalog. It's just really, really awful to listen to. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be, I'm sure like Ween or somebody could write a great song about that, but yeah, this one doesn't work for me at all. Miniature Sun, I think it's like supposed to be a loungy song, is the least relaxed I've ever been during a loungy song, because there's just, again, too much stuff going on. So just not a lot of stuff that I'm super excited about. Some stuff that's fine. Long, and just at the end of the day, there's just, I prefer the other albums, and that's just what it comes down to. But so 6 for Oranges and Lemons. I apologize again, but just how I feel.
Yeah, I think a lot of your points on that are valid, and I will be talking about it later, but not loads later. And I think to the point on the sort of, yeah, like Ween could pull off a song like that. I think a lot of XTC's problem when they reach that later phase is that I think they get very self-serious. And I think, especially on that album, and there's a lot of like youthful sort of humor and fun to sort of their late 70s, early 80s material that you kind of lose after a while.
Yeah. Partridge especially
yeah,
gets very self-serious, and it can be definitely bothersome. His voice can also be a little bit, just if you're not in the right mood, it can be a little bit off-putting too. So he kind of gets very confident with himself, for better or worse, at the end of this run.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely be talking about some similar things when I get to it, but I guess it bothered me less, maybe. So number 12 is your bottom album, Go To. I think it's a little bit more polished than White Music, but I'm not that confident in these placements at the bottom. I think Big Express is pretty clear at the bottom, but these two, like, I don't know, would I rather listen to White Music just for the standout tracks? Because Go To doesn't really have many, but there's nothing bad either. It's just kind of like all pretty good. I think, yeah, Mechanic Dancing, I actually don't like that song much. I think it's really, really, really annoying. I actually do like the non-album single, Are You Receiving Me, better than the rest of the album, pretty much. I think they're sort of channeling some different influences here. I think Battery Brides almost has like a Roxy Music type sound to it, which I think is pretty cool. And then Red reminds me of The Beat, or the English Beat, in parts, which I really appreciate, that sort of ska influence. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm the Audience is pretty good as a closer. I think it's probably my favorite track, which probably helps the album, you know, ending on a strong note. Yeah, apart from Mechanic Dancing, there's not really any that I dislike. Nothing quite reaches sort of Statue of Liberty level. I don't really have much to say. It's just not really as much my style of music as what they would do later on. And I think they took this sort of angular, post-punky kind of sound on the third album, like I said, and sort of refined it and did it to the best of its powers. So yeah, Go To is I got it as a low 7, sort of on the borderline there, but yeah, 6.75. Why not?
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with all those points. But I feel differently about the debut, as you know. So my number 12, going to the very other end of the spectrum here, I am going with Wasp Star, Apple Venus Volume 2. And I didn't really know what to expect with this album because, you know, I kind of read along the like Wikipedia entries or whatever, and most of them are pretty long, and this one's just like, here's the last album by XTC. And I thought, okay, it's Apple Venus Volume 2. And so the first volume had a lot of orchestral stuff, so maybe we'll hear more of that. No, they're just back to honestly very catchy rock songs. Especially the first string of tracks is actually like pretty good. I kind of dismissed this album at first because my first listen through was kind of rough, honestly. But kind of going back to it, I just realized like, oh, Playground, that's catchy. Stupidly Happy, that's catchy. In Another Life, super catchy. My Brown Guitar, really catchy. Like, and it feels like I was kind of realizing suddenly, oh, this is a pretty good album. Actually, I think they have a great use of melody. It's a little bit like getting to post grungy kind of polish. So I kind of maybe loses a couple points from that, but it's still like these are good songs, and it just shows that they're still great musicians, even for this late period album. That said, I think this really crashes in the second half. It does not, for me, keep up the momentum all the way through. Track 11 is called Church of Women, and for a Partridge song called Church of Women, I immediately thought that wasn't going to turn out well, and I was correct. Incredibly stupid song, not good. A lot of these late ones, they're okay, but I just don't really remember them. Wounded Horse, kind of slow. You and the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful is okay. The Wheel and the Maypole, not my favorite closer. We're All Light kind of felt to me almost like it could be on The Big Bang Theory, and I'm not saying that in a positive way at all. So, and then I'm the Man Who Murdered Love was the single, and it's a little too like Partridge trying to be overly catchy for me. So just not a whole lot that excites me in the second half. There is the track Standing In for Joe, which is a Molding track, and it sounds a lot like Berrytown by Steely Dan, and it may be even a little bit more catchy, but I still kind of feel like it's a little bit copycat as well. So I don't quite know how to feel about that one, but yeah, I think again all Molding songs are good. I pretty much every album I'm going to say like Molding songs are all good, and that's true here too. And yeah, it ends up at around a 7 for me. I think it's good, and I think you shouldn't back out before hearing this one. There's plenty of stuff to be in for it even here. So
Yeah, we're at a similar point. Maybe not always the same albums, but yeah, similar scores. I'm going Apple Venus Volume 1 at number 11. I don't know. Yeah, you sort of mentioned that there's no real connection between the Apple Venus albums. Fun fact: I thought when we were starting this project that there were 13 XTC albums. I didn't even know Wasp Star existed. I don't know. It's all like buried on Radio Music, kind of like all these like archival stuff, and it's like barely anyone's heard it because it like Apple Venus Volume 1, it's not on streaming. So yeah, I came to Apple Venus Volume 1. It's got a really high Radio Music score. I've seen some people, including Trey, who I've done Radiohead rankings with, say it's their best album. And I'm like, really? Like, there's some good elements to it, obviously. I have it also as like a low 7. I think the orchestration is really beautiful. I think this album sounds great. It's the best sounding post Rundgren album by a landslide. I think River of Orchids is a really cool opener that establishes the sound immediately. Then, like a lot of the songs in here are a bit weak. I think I'd like that is sounds like I wrote down that it sounds like 100 other XTC songs, which might be an exaggeration, but by this point it was like this 60s pop style was just like even me, who was maybe more enthusiastic about it than you were, I was starting to be beaten across the head with these like sunshiny 60s pop songs. Easter Theatre is like very overtly orchestral, and yeah, not massively my thing. I like Nights in Shining Karma, good soft electric guitar on that one, and Frivolous Tonight is a Colin Moulding song, and I think his voice does not sound great on these last two. His voice kind of sounded the same for most of their discography, and then there's like a 7-year gap between None Such and this one, and his voice is just gone. It really does not sound the same to me, which is kind of sad. Yeah, really nice strings throughout. No other tracks really worth mentioning apart from Your Dictionary, which is hilariously bad. Um, the worst XTC song, I think. It's the lyrics completely derail the song. Um, it's just like HATE, is that how you spell love in your dictionary? And he's like SHIT, is that how you spell friend in your dictionary? It's like, what are you doing? It's so embarrassing. And from a guy who, I'm going to talk about some great songwriting from him, from Andy Partridge early on in their career, it's really pretty embarrassing. So, yeah, I think it sounds great. It's really the songwriting for me on this album that lets it down. So, I've got it as a 7. And the only real song I'd go back to would be, well, River of Orchids and Nights in Shining Karma I liked. But the rest is kind of big string sections doing a lot of the work, I think, rather than the songwriting. So, yeah.
Well, that's an interesting analysis there. Probably Your Dictionary, probably number 2 worst XTC song for me. I think Pink Thing may be my number 1 personally, but Your Dictionary is very close. It is really bad. I don't know what he was thinking. Completely agree there. But I'm going to continue on now. I have in my next spot, which is number 11, the second, but the first I'm mentioning of 2 Dukes of the Stratosphere albums on this list. And that one for me is going to be Sonic Sunspot. And this is interesting. It came after Skylarking, and then before that was 25 O'Clock, which was the first Dukes album. I feel like in the first one they were very mission focused, where they really wanted to sound like an old 60s band and imitate exactly that atmosphere. Here, it feels like they wanted to do another Dukes album, but there's a little bit of stretching, and some of the songs sound a little bit more like a typical XTC, frenetic, quirky type atmosphere. Like the second track, Have You Seen Jackie, has a little bit of that attitude while still having plenty of psychedelic flair. They added some like sound clips between some of the tracks, which is cool and an interesting element. It's a shorter album. Both of the Dukes albums are a little shorter. The opener, Vanishing Girl, is spectacular. Absolutely love that song. One of their best psychedelic type songs, 60s songs in their whole catalog. I just don't think anything on this album quite matches up to the first for me, but I don't really not enjoy it or any particular track on it. It's just that some of them are a little slow, like Kaleidoscope feels a little slow to me. In the second half, I kind of like tracks like Brainiac's Daughter and The Affiliated. The latter kind of has a nice change up in the middle. And then it kind of ends with a Beach Boys pastiche, Pale and Precious. Wasn't there actually their last Beach Boys pastiche? I feel like the last track of Oranges and Lemons was a little bit like that, as well as a track on Apple Venus Volume 1. But this it's fine. I'd still probably rather listen to the Beach Boys, but it's fun to see them imitate the sound pretty well. So yeah, it's I like 60s psychedelic music, and I think they kind of do they continue to do a good job of kind of evoking that spirit for an album made in the 80s, and I like that. But there's other than the opening track, there's just not a lot of here that I remember or sticks out in my mind a lot. So 7 for that one.
So we're going to keep talking about the Dukes of Stratosphere at my number 10, and it's going to be the EP 25 O'Clock for me at number 10. Which yeah, I mean, I kind of see what you're saying. It's definitely more focused on like aping the sound of a era rather than doing something new per se, which is probably why I liked it a bit less than the other one. But there's definitely some good stuff. I think this is considerably better than Apple Venus Volume 1. I think there's like quite a gap here. I like the opening title track. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I think My Love Explodes is very The Big Express is what I wrote down. Very like cluttered and kind of messy. Colin's song What in the World, pretty nice. Your Gold Dress, some really good keys on it, really cool. And the Mole from the Ministry has this vocal effect in the verses, which I really don't enjoy at all. And I find the vocal pretty annoying. So Yeah, that song, because it's only 6 songs as an EP, so like when one song doesn't work, it kind of just drags the whole thing down. But yeah, there's some good moments. Like I think they're clearly having fun as this sort of alter ego of themselves. And yeah, again, not much to say. I'm kind of like looking forward to talking about my top ones a bit. These middle ones are just kind of like, yeah, it's good. You know, XTC, good songwriting, whatever. Sometimes bad songwriting. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like a cool, unique '60s sound that they got here with like the analog recording and stuff. So that's definitely commendable. I think it's a really cool project. In terms of like listening to the albums again, probably wouldn't reach for them, but individual tracks definitely would. Especially Your Gold Dress. That's probably my favorite one. So I give that one a 7 as well. Pretty good. Nothing groundbreaking though.
Well, that is definitely how I feel about albums I'm placing at this ranking. Not necessarily how I feel about that album. So moving on to another album that I do feel that way about, and it's your bottom album. It's The Big Express. The Big Express. And yeah, I don't totally disagree with what you were saying. Although I think for me, there's just a few more tracks that kind of pop out. So yeah, and I think I liked this era quite a bit too. So I was a little surprised that this album was as weak as it was. The big issue I think with it is the production. It just sounds like, again, Partridge had a little bit too much control. There's too many things going on. It's too busy. And it doesn't sound that great as a result. And yeah, there are some weird songs on here, like "Shake Your Donkey Up." Although I don't necessarily hate that song. I think it's kind of funny. It doesn't totally not work for me, but it's not a highlight by any means. I thought the opener, "Wake Up" by Colin Moulding, of course, was quite good. Has a cool kind of, this is maybe the one moment in the album where the production does kind of work, because the guitars are kind of swishing back and forth across your headphones. And I think that's kind of cool. And I thought that the lyrics are kind of philosophical too, in an interesting way. "All You Pretty Girls" is like a sea shanty, which is bizarre for track 2. And then you get "Shake Your Donkey Up," which is bizarre. And then you get "Seagulls Screaming Kiss Her, Kiss Her," which is another kind of bizarre one. But I don't know. That one is kind of interesting. It does. I have a little bit of a fondness for it. It's a little bit of an annoying Partridge sound, but yeah, it kind of works for me. I think you can almost imagine the like animals like kind of chanting for him to follow his heart or something like that, and I like it. This Rolled Over, and then side 2 starts with "The Everyday Story of Small Town." I don't disagree that it sounds sitcom-y, but I am very impressed by the arrangement of that song. I dig it a lot. Yeah, and then a lot of side 2, not that memorable. "Rain of Blows" especially kind of lows. "I Remember the Sun," you liked it. I remember you saying it's one of my lesser favorite Moulding tracks. It's fine. It's loungy, but it just doesn't do a whole lot for me. And yeah, it's supposed to be a concept album, and really the only song that's part of that concept is the last track, "Train Running Low on Soul Coal." There's another one that's like an outtake that was kind of in that same vein, but yeah, I don't think the concept quite comes across like they intended it to, or I almost feel like they should have either done no concept or done a concept. Whatever we got here is kind of bizarre. So it's not the best experience, but there's a few tracks I like, and I don't know. I feel like even the weird songs at the beginning, they're more interesting to me than a number of the songs in like "Oranges and Lemons," for instance. So it ends up here, 7 for this one.
Just rolling through sevens. Rolling through sevens. XTC are pretty good albums.
Yes, very much so.
My number 9, not that much higher than its counterpart, Wasp Star, Apple Venus Volume 2. Kind of agree with a lot of what you said. Very front-loaded album. I think the first half, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be like top 5. Like, I think this album starts amazing. Playground is like the furthest into power pop they ever went, and I am all here for it. So cool. Stupidly Happy is such a great riff, and like such a surprising direction after Apple Venus Volume 1. It's just not related in the slightest, which is strange. But I really like In Another Life, really infectious. The harmonica is really cool, the subtle horns as well. But yeah, I think Colin's voice still doesn't sound too great, but his songwriting on here is much better than it was on Volume 1. There's a couple then weaker tracks before I'm the Man Who Murdered Love, which is pretty nice, puts a smile on my face. Standing In for Joe has some pretty good strings on it. Wounded Horse, quite a slog. You in the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful, quite a slog. Church of Women, great harmonies, great guitar solo, terrible song. That's kind of how I feel about that one. It's I can see what he was trying to do, worship at the Church of Women, but like it comes from a good place, but the execution is just, it's not good. And then The Wheel and the Maypole is the final song they ever released as of now. Kind of this multi-part structure, again, sort of Surf's Up-esque, which is not the first time. Well, not the last time I'll mention that. Pretty good album, stronger at the front. Better than Volume 1, but it's not, it's a pretty good power pop album. It was cool that it was a direction that they hadn't really gone in, especially the first few tracks sounded quite different to what they'd been doing for a while, which is pretty cool. There was a bit more urgency, but I don't know. It's never really going to be one I'm like, I want to listen to XTC. Let's listen to Wasp Star. Maybe the first like 3 or 4 tracks, but it's pretty good. Number 9, 7 out of 10.
Yeah, for sure. Power pop is, I didn't say that, but yeah, it definitely sounds like that. I thought the first few almost got into that number 1 record territory, which was I was not expecting that. So
yeah, I didn't think about that, but now you've mentioned it, that makes total sense. It's very Big Star. Yeah.
And you also mentioned Wheel and the Maypole having a 2-part structure, and that does bring that back for me. I think the second part was a little better, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there's a lot of weaker tracks at the end. So, all right, my next one is gonna rile some feathers again. This one is one of their more popular albums on rating sites and stuff like that. But my number 9 is Black Sea, and this one just, I don't quite get the big deal. I do hear, so this is it's right after Drums and Wires, and that album kind of helped refine their post-punk sound to a more kind of like atmospheric quality, angular. So it has a little bit more of those like maybe Joy Division-y, I don't know if even that's quite right, but sounds. And I think that the sound is cool. I like how they were able to do that. And I think Black Sea continues that sound. And I think much of this album sounds quite good. It's definitely kind of emblematic of this era. They kind of started on with Drums and Wires and opens well. The first song, Respectable Street, kind of has a bit of a Britpop sound, which, and this is years before Britpop, so it's very cool that they're kind of getting into that territory. And so that kind of got me excited. And then Generals and Majors is the second track, and this is a super catchy track. Love the kind of scales in the guitar part, and the chorus is just really sing-alongable, catchy. So that's a great one. And then, the Living Through Another Cuba is the kind of the first one where it feels like, okay, it's like an exercise in like cool sounds. And for me, that's not enough. I'm not somebody that will judge an album well just because it has kind of like sharp, angular, dissonant, not exactly dissonant, but that like post-punky. Post-punk isn't my favorite genre. I can appreciate it plenty, but like if it's just like, well, this is cool post-punk, it's not enough for me. And that's why I feel like a bunch of this album is. No Language in Our Lungs feels a little bit like that. A lot of the songs, they feel like they don't change that much from the start. Towers of London has more of a Beatlesque type feel, specifically the song Rain. It's almost like ripping off from that. But it's the same kind of thing. It's fine, but it doesn't change a lot. Paper and Iron is one of the cooler post-punk type experiments on it. I think I dig that one. Burning with Optimism Flame has them kind of adding some of those like quirky elements in. It's okay. Sergeant Rock is not a song I enjoy. Kind of very cheesy lyrics about like, I don't know, like a comic book hero or something. I can't even quite remember it quite right. Getting all the girls or something along those lines. Or maybe he's like helped by the hero. Anyway, it just didn't work for me. It's trying to be very catchy. It's where Partridge goes too much for me. And then the last track, which I cannot pronounce, Travels in Nihilon, Nylon. Yeah, it's for me. It's a little. I get why some people are probably into it, but it's very, very like dark and atmospheric for me, and it's just not really the kind of music I enjoy. So for me, it ends up like I still like it, but I just don't like it that much more than the ones I previously talked about. So it's still at 7 for me. And yeah, I mean, I can see why people like it, but it just doesn't quite push me over the edge. So that's where I got that one.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, even though we went through all this together. I was not expecting it that way.
I told you at the time.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, that was months ago. I don't remember.
That's fair.
So my number 8 is my last 7 out of 10. So after this, we're getting into what I consider to be great albums. I've got Sonic Sunspot, the second Dukes of the Stratosphere album. It's not that much better than the other one, I think. They kind of put them on a similar pegging, but I think this one gives me more of a reason to revisit it, I think, just because it's a bit more unique. I love Vanishing Girl, I agree. Colin once again, just knocking it out of the park. I think it's Colin. Yeah. Have you seen Jackie is a bit more quirky and weird. Yeah, kind of an odd choice for track 2, sequencing wise, but it's a pretty good song. I think Little Lighthouse is one of Andy's best vocal performances. I think he sounds great on that song. And then, yeah, there's quite a bit of this with XTC for me. It's like great start. And then like track 4, 3, 4, 5 maybe is just like, You're a Good Man, Albert Brown, pretty obnoxious, very loud and in your face. Not really what they do best with this kind of project, you know. I like Brain X Daughter as well. It's pretty good. The Affiliated, I think the album ends pretty strong with Brain X Daughter, The Affiliated, and Pale and Precious, the Surfs Up pastiche. Yeah, probably my second favorite on the album behind Vanishing Girl. I think both the songs are pretty great. Even though Pale and Precious is just kind of ripping off Brian Wilson, but I think they do a really good job of it. It's kind of like a reimagining of it, and you know, all the parts are like uniquely catchy in their own way. There's never like a melody where I'm like, oh, that sounds like something the Beach Boys wrote. You know, I think their unique sort of sense of melody and songwriting is still present throughout this project, which is cool. But yeah, I just think the Dukes of Stratosphere. I've had both of them now. You've had one of them. I think to me, it's more like an interesting project than it is like part of my essential XTC like, you know, canon. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, yeah, this is cool that it happened and it sounds good and there are some good songs, but it's not like my favorite stuff, which we will be getting to very soon. My top half of my list, I'm pretty happy with, pretty strong.
Well, isn't that good for you, Tom? All right. So moving on, I still do not have the other Dukes album. That's still to come. My number 8 is going to be Non-Such, with a V, as they do in the old printed texts. This one came right after Oranges and Lemons, which you may remember ranked fairly low for me here. But I feel like the sound is much better on this album. And as a result, there are some tracks that I genuinely quite enjoy. And but it's not all the tracks. There are 17 tracks here, and it is still quite long. But you know, I think they've settled well. With their success with Mayor of Simpleton or whatnot, into this kind of Beatle-esque alternative band that put together some nice melodies, and I think that's definitely on display here. The Disappointed is one of the more catchy ones. Maybe spoiler, it just missed my top 20 songs, but I really like that one. Then She Appeared is another highlight here. Really beautiful guitar intro, almost Stone Roses like or something like that, maybe. Partridge is actually kind of the star here, interestingly. Molding songs are maybe among the weaker sets. You got My Bird Performs, which is okay. The Smartest Monkeys is kind of like, it's fun. I like the lyrics of it. So it's good. I like it. Makes me smile. War Dance has kind of a weird clarinet in it. Kind of works, kind of doesn't. Anyway, going back to Partridge, he, on a couple tracks here, started experimenting a little bit more with a little bit from orchestral sound. Rook is the first one where on the chorus you can kind of hear a piano part that's looping, and it sounds a little bit more compositionally advanced. Maybe not that means it's better, but just he's getting a little bit more influenced by classical music, and I enjoyed hearing that as a mix-up to everything else. And also on the track Wrapped in Gray, there's a little bit of a orchestral splendor to that track. Really sweet and uplifting track. Not every track works. There's kind of a weak stretch with Holly Up on Poppy and Crocodile, not my favorites. That Wave doesn't quite work for me. Books Are Burning is the last song, and it doesn't quite do it for me either. So it's kind of long, and an opener, Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead, is fine, but they have better openers. So if you trimmed a few tracks down here, I think you could get to an 8 with this album for sure. But as it stands, it's a high 7 for me.
Yeah, cool. As you may have been able to tell by my facial expressions, I have it a little bit higher, but that's fine.
Very interesting.
Maybe I can bring you back on side, because I'm finally going to mention Oranges and Lemons as my number 7. So yeah, not ridiculously high, but it's the beginning of where I'm like, yeah, this is good stuff. And I actually feel quite passionate to talk about it, which is cool. I think I said in our little chat that the 2 through 7s range was really difficult for me. Like a lot of albums that I loved some tracks from, and then there are also the occasional duds, and then like some of them have completely different problems to other ones, in my opinion. So like trying to rank them was like one of the hardest rankings I've done, honestly. Just like I had to re-listen to 2 or 3 of these just to figure out where they land. And Oranges and Lemons, I kind of knew that this would be at the bottom of that sort of chasing pack, if you will, just because, yeah, a lot of what you said is very valid. Sonically, it can be a bit over the top at times. There's not as much subtlety, and like I don't know, there's like a nice minimalist approach to Todd's production on Skylarking. Like every instrument that comes in, you notice it, and you take it, sort of occupies a space in the song that feels important. Whereas on Oranges and Lemons, sometimes the compositions can be a bit just like over the top, quirky, trying too hard to be, this grand thing. And that also is reflected in the lyrics. This is the first album where I really thought the lyrics were quite weak. On some songs, I think some songs have some really good lyrics, but a song like what was the song I was? Oh my god, yeah, Pink Thing was the one. Yeah, just not that great lyrically. And The Loving, that was the other one I was thinking of. It's just like, come on, like it's way too overly preachy, but at the same time that song is so catchy and so fun. Even when we were like loading up into this call, I was like, all around the world, do 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 do. Yeah, it's like, it's a really like fun little song. And I can't help that. I do have a good time listening to most of these songs, even though it is way too long. I think it opens really great. I actually love Garden of Earthly Delights. I know you don't. I think it works really nicely as an opener. I think it's really catchy. Sort of got this like more Indian influence that they sort of would incorporate occasionally. But that is a little bit buried in the mix, admittedly. And Mayor of Simpleton is one of my favorite XTC songs. It'll be showing up pretty high on the songs list. I think it's more straightforward, but as I've come to listen to it more and more, it's sort of grown on me more and more. I think the bass line is absolutely impeccable. I think the lyrics on it are really great, sort of like self-deprecating, um, kind of a fun element to it. But I'll talk about that more later on. King for a Day, more sort of 80s sounding pop, really just strong start to the album. Here Comes President Kill Again, another example of the lyrics being not that great. But again, I love the instrumental, and I think it's like a pretty good song. Horse Skeleton Steps Out, really unique atmosphere. I really like the vibe of that one. Yeah, One of the Millions, another lyrical misstep, overly political without any substance. Scarecrow People, meh. But then you get Merely a Man, which is more straightforward, pretty good. Cynical Days is a Collins song, really jazzy feel, sort of breezes by nice. I like when they incorporate a more jazzy feel to their songs, more so maybe on other ones than on this one, but it works well for this one. Yeah, overall, like Jewel Kills and Children is a nice closer, but I couldn't even mention every song because there's just too many of them. And it's like, yeah, there's definitely an issue with a lot of their albums, like you said, that they were just like, all right, we're going to make another double album and another double album and another double album, and it's like we don't need this many. So yeah, I think it's a low 8 for me. I think the highlights really propel it up to that point, because I do think the best songs on here are excellent. But I just think they had 6 albums that were better. So that's why Oranges and Lemons lands at number 7.
Yeah, plenty of good points there. I don't dislike that take at all. I think I want to like that album. You know, you see it like looks like Yellow Submarine, and they have, you know, fun Beatlesy songs. So, you know, if that's all you're really going for, then that album will probably deliver. So yeah. I'm glad we definitely have some differences of opinion so far, as we kind of knew going into this.
That makes it interesting, though. That makes it interesting.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting. But yeah, and I also, you know, I think there's a lot of bands I line up with the critical consensus, you know, quite a bit, and for whatever reason, this one was not quite as much that way for me, and that's kind of coming in a little bit at my number 7 here. My number 7 is going to be English Settlement. And yeah,
wow. Was not expecting that either.
This is one of their more respected albums for sure. Although I don't know that many people that rate this over an 8, but anyway, it's for a later discussion. But yeah, this is just a case of, it's a double album again. You just were talking about it, and yeah, for me, it's just that I like some of the songs and I don't like others as much. Came after Black Sea, and you can kind of tell they're softening the sound and getting a little bit closer into that melodic sound that something like Skylarking would have, but not quite as much of the 60s influence yet, because they hadn't done the Dukes of the Stratosphere. But anyway, the first 2 tracks are both by Colin Moulding, and they're both great. I love both of them a lot. Runaways is a really unique opener, really kind of how do I even describe this song? Mellow and groovy, almost stoned out, just really cool way to open. Not what I expected from them, and really interesting. Then it moves into Ball and Chain, which is a song Moulding didn't like a lot, but I love it. I think I like the lyrics about you know, places being torn down for not good reasons by governments, and the sonic qualities of the sound too. There's these synths on it that almost sound like they're straight out of like Rush or even Styx or something like that. But it's so cool. I think it works really well because it fits kind of like a glove with their more refined, like post-punky guitar landscape. So it's very interesting. I think it's very catchy. The chorus of it is very catchy. So it kind of moves between different sections. Really cool song. Then Senses Working Overtime is next. This is one of the more popular XTC songs, I think. And it's just not a Zach core track. But I like it. I don't think it's a bad song. I don't know. The verses and the chorus is very, very earworm, and then the verses are a little less so. So I don't quite get it. But next few are cool. Jason and the Argonauts is kind of like a almost kind of like a folky jam, and that's kind of cool. No Thugs in Our House, almost like going back to the Who or something like that. It's okay. Yacht Dance, kind of a surprisingly good one. I tend to go back to it more than I think I would because it's a fairly feels like a fairly minor entry, but it's good. All of a sudden, It's Too Late ends the first side well. As the side 3 just doesn't feel very necessary overall to me. Melt the Guns has a little bit of like a maybe reggae or influence to it, or ska and something like that. A little bit repetitive and long. Some of these songs I just don't remember super well either, but I did listen to them a lot, so it's more I think that they're just not that memorable. Like Leisure or Knuckle Down. I don't. Down in the Cockpit is another like kind of sky one. So there's a long break here where I'm just not really attaching to the songs for whatever reason. And then at the end, the final 2 tracks, I think it does come back with English Roundabout, which is a nice catchy one. Nice, just structure to it. It feels like the guitar and the vocals are chasing the guitar or something along those lines, just like a roundabout. And then Snowman is also a really nice closer. So plenty of good stuff in here. And I actually think I had this at a 7 when I first described it, but in re-listening, I think it gets to an 8 for me. So I have this one at 8, but it's still just because there's a number of songs in the middle that I just am not that crazy about. Unfortunately, I just have 6 albums above it, and just how it is. So
yeah, this is the thing, right? Is the the good thing about doing a list in this order, starting at the bottom, is we're just getting more and more positive as we go. But you're not the only one that is going to be making claims that are going to get your head taken off by XTC fans, because my next is Drums and Wires, which I do like, but Making Plans for Nigel, I don't like it that much.
Don't understand.
It's fine. It's pretty fun, but like, it wasn't a song I considered for my top 20. It's not like I dislike it. I just think like the hook's kind of annoying. It's like it's all right. It's fine. But luckily for Drums and Wires, there are a lot of really good songs that I do like on it. I think Helicopter is pretty insane. Like, I kind of love that about it. It's like, I think they've kind of managed to find a balance here between like the atmospheric that they want to shoot for and this more like poppy style, which they did on a few songs on the first 2 albums, like Statue of Liberty. And that's kind of where Helicopter comes in, where it's kind of manic, but it's kind of catchy as well, which I kind of like. I think the guitar on this album is amazing, like some really cool guitar parts, especially on a track like Day In, Day Out. When You're in the Eye of Difficulty is my favorite on the album. It's absolutely nuts. That hook is just how it just keeps repeating and repeating, like it's endless, which I could also see that song being annoying, but for some reason that one just like, I really get into it. Yeah, I think Real by Real is pretty good as well. It's just like a pretty good album track. I could see why it's not one that's talked about much, but I enjoy it. Millions is another one that sort of goes for this like soundscape type thing, which is pretty cool. I really like That Is the Way. I think the trumpet on it adds a real good deal of variety. Again, exploring these sort of more jazzy sounds, which this is what I mean. This is the first album where they're really separating themselves from their contemporaries, and they're sort of announcing themselves as, we're XTC, we're doing our own thing. Outside World is a more punky track, sort of straight up, sort of energetic punk. So much momentum. The rhythm section on that song is just on fire. So good. And then Complicated Game, very angry song. Partridge really, really lets loose, and it feels authentic. Apart, not like his sort of John Lennon-esque, everybody should love each other sort of songs that you get 10 years after this. This feels like a really, he really is pouring his heart into this, which I appreciate. And yeah, I think this is pretty clearly their best effort up to this point for me. Yeah, and I think the future, what it really comes down to is that Making Plans for Nigel is sort of, your love of the album is going to rest on that song, I think in a lot of ways. And I do like it. It's all right, but I think there are other songs that I enjoy more, and as a whole listen, it's really good, but it's not really going to capture what I love in music as much as what would come afterwards, which I kind of knew going in that this was not going to be my favorite XTC album just because of the style of it. But yeah, for what it is, I think it's really great, and it's a strong 8. Sorry, I nearly slipped up on my own rule there. But yeah, I think the top 5 is really like my essential XTC albums for sure. But Drums and Wires, I think if you're into post punk, definitely must listen. It deserves its place on all these like 1001 albums you need to hear before you die, like books and stuff. Like, it's that kind of important album, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so I have to be the defender of Making Plans for Nigel representative, and you can be the Black Sea defender. I'm guessing most XCC fans are probably a fan of both, so I don't know what it is with us, but
yeah, we're sort of like both ends of an equally wild spectrum, you know?
Yes, exactly. But together we will have a somewhat reasonable ranking. I don't know. Anyway, so my next one is probably unreasonably high for some people, but I just think it's super fun. It is the EP by Dukes of Stratosphere. It is 25 o'clock at my number 6. And I just think what they're trying to go for here, they just wildly succeed. I think they wanted to make a short album recorded in analog, just in this exact style of the 60s. I think they even like dressed up in the look or something when recording the album. Guitarist Dave Gregory was very into that, I think. And almost all these songs you can kind of trace a little bit back to certain 60s songs, but I actually almost slightly prefer listening to most of these songs. Opens with 25 o'clock, which just has like that perfect kind of like circus-like quality that a lot of these 60s psychedelic bands had, and then quickly went away when the 70s came around. So it's really fun to kind of hear a band try to replicate that sound and have that kind of attitude. Moving into Bike Ride to the Moon, which is very Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd, but just very weird and whimsical. And then one of my personal favorites on this little EP, My Love Explodes, just very heavy, but 60s heavy riff, kind of like that, like first, early heavy metal kind of feel almost. It's still garage rock, but you're really getting that, like, it doesn't sound quite as extreme as like death metal or whatever, but just the attitude was just so heavy and so kind of like sexual, and it's I think it's cool as heck. Then Molding Song, What in the World, takes me right to that Rolling Stones album after Between the Buttons, whatever it was called.
Satanic Majesties.
Satanic Majesty, yes. Right into that world. And it's so weird. And he's having so much fun just being like from the future. And I just love the nothing is super original. And honestly, none of these songs are going to make my top 20 songs, but I just think every single one is just hitting the right notes and keeping me smiling. Your Gold Dress is a lot like My Love Explodes, and then it ends with The Mole from the Ministry, which is a Beatles pastiche, much like their Beach Boys pastiche on the next one. It's maybe more interesting for just how they imitate than what it actually sounds like, but I think it's a nice way to end. And yeah, 6 tracks I like, so really that's what pushes it above is albums like English Settlement. There's just kind of stretches where I'm not that into it, whereas here it's short and I enjoy the whole thing. So an 8 for 25 o'clock.
Nice. So my number 5 might be an equally controversially high one, but neither of us have mentioned it yet. So I think we kind of realized that we both really like this album, which is really cool. We are both going to be on the defense of Mama, which is their 1983 effort. I actually had this at number 3 when I first drafted up the list, but I re-listened to it alongside my now 3 and 4. And yeah, I think the songs I remembered, I love, and the songs I didn't remember, there was a reason I didn't remember them. So that's kind of the realization that I came to. But this is a highly underrated album, I think. I think it's been largely forgotten. And I think that's really just unjust. I think Beating of Hearts is a super cool way to open. Love the sort of Eastern flavor of it. But then it's this next 3-track run that just sold me on the album the first time I heard it. Wonderland, Colin, again, this cool sort of synth pop sound, but it sounds like dated for its time. But I can't help but think that was intentional. Like it sounds like you were saying, like sort of looking into the future, but from someone back in time. You know, it's like that's kind of the vibe I get from that song. I love the chorus; it's so sweet. Just a really good vibe song, like immediately infectious. Love on a Farm Boy's Wages is one of Andy Partridge's best songs for sure. Excellent guitar work, very melancholic tone until it explodes into life with that toe tapping chorus, like when the second guitar part comes in. So cool. And then Great Fire I really like as well, especially the chorus, just really passionate vocal delivery from Andy there. I think the songs here are just more subtle and there's less quirkiness. The arrangements are dense, but they don't feel overpowering. Where I think even like apart from my number one, some of my favorite XTC albums, they're quite hard to listen to because they're trying all the time to just like amp the quirkiness up and up and up. It feels like even more as the album goes on. And I think this one just kind of brings things back a little bit, and it's nice and simple a lot of the time. I Deliver Us from the Elements is the first, I don't want to say stumbling block because I don't mind it. I think Colin's vocal and the melody are amazing, but the production of it is not quite as good as the rest of the album. I think Human Alchemy is the biggest stumbling block on the album for me. It's just a bit sort of nondescript. And on an album this short, you know, when there are tracks that I don't like, I think it hurts even more than on a long album, you know, because at least you've got more good stuff there. And I think then, though, there's a couple of really cool songs in a row with Ladybird, again, the sort of jazzy vibes. In Loving Memory of a Name, really cool keys on that one, with a nice transition into Me and the Wind. And yeah, the last two songs are more in line with their sort of post-punk roots, but I think it works even though they don't really fit with anything else on the album. It does feel sort of like a genre mishmash, which I kind of appreciate, considering it's like what 37 minutes long or something. It's one of their shorter albums, and that kind of helps it. I think it's a more digestible listen, and yeah, some nice straightforward compositions in places, but also some complexity when it's needed. Pretty strong 8 again for Mama. I think it's really good. I wish I could put it higher, but tracks like Human Alchemy just drag it down a little bit. But the best songs are just incredible, and it sounds great. It sounds so great.
Well, I'm glad you like it. I remember maybe you didn't like that one as much at first, but with more time, it sounds like it's growing for you, which is great. I have very similar feelings, but just replace your criticisms with praise. It's kind of where I'm at there. Anyway, maybe I'm revealing too much, but you can decide that later, Tom. So yeah, my next album is one you talked about a long time ago, and you know, I think at this point there's like a few albums that are well regarded left, and then a few albums that probably people are like, why is this so high? But for number 5, I've got Apple Venus Volume 1, and
wow, that is shocking.
yeah, this one grew a lot for me with repeated listens. I mean, I don't know if you know me. I'm a fan of like classical music and stuff, so I really appreciated the direction they were going for here. They only had like one day or something to work with the orchestra, and I'm super happy they did, and I think that it comes off really well. The opener especially is really cool, River of Orchids. There's kind of an influence from classical minimalism, like Philip Glass or Steve Reich, which would later also influence Sufjan Stevens in the kind of style of it. And I love the way that it kind of opens with like the drops and then kind of transitions into kind of an ostinato by the orchestra that kind of keeps growing with more and more elements. And then the lyrics are really touching as well, kind of about reclaiming roads from vehicles and bringing them back to the people. And So a lot of these songs kind of have these like pagan themes, which I think is a very interesting direction to take at this kind of late stage. But it does make sense for them, I think, based on kind of their increasing interest in this kind of like 60s inspired sound to go there. I have to disagree with you on I'd like that. You kind of said this is moving into a territory that is just, you're kind of tired of it by this point. For me, it's like this is one of the best examples of the sound, that melodic sound. I think it's really beautiful, earnest, playful. This is not Partridge and overbearing mode. This is Partridge and a mode. This is my preferred Partridge, is where he's sounding like he's just like taking a bike ride with a girl in the front seat or something, and like laughing in the trees. Like they really get that vibe on this track, and it's really throughout this album. Easter Theater is an interesting one where you kind of goes back to the orchestral sound. It's almost kind of like mixing like nature allegories and sexual allegories and stuff like that, but it's kind of intriguing to me. Just the sound of it, I think you said it sounds really good, and I agree. I thought that was a big plus for it. Nights in Charming Karma, really relaxed, but almost like some tracks in like proggy albums would be kind of like this, where it's not a lot happening, but you still love just kind of like relaxing into the sound. And then, yeah, I don't know if I disagree with you exactly about Molding's voice change at this point, but for me, whatever reason, it doesn't bother me at all. I still think he's writing great tracks, and I think Frivolous Tonight is right there. I think it kind of takes that like barish feel of Smartest Monkey, and kind of amps it up, and then the big like orchestra coming in at the end. It's honestly, I find it touching. I think it's really beautiful. This whole album so far, I'm just like, wow, I think this is great. It gets a little rougher in the second half. Green Man I do like. It's a little bit long, but it has that Eastern influence and less buried in the mix than the opener to Oranges and Lemons. So I like that. And then Your Dictionary comes, and I'm just like, what's going on? Horrible album bombing track. This one might have been a 9 without it. It may be the one thing bringing it down. Fruit Nut kind of reminds me, it's interesting. There's a track called Vegetables on Smile Sessions, and this kind of feels like they're trying to do the same thing here, which I kind of appreciated. Harvest Festival, again, kind of like he's remembering like a holiday or something from his childhood, and it has that whimsical, reflective nature. And then Last Balloon also kind of just sweeps you out. It's such an easy album to kind of just digest, and I'm not saying it's perfect, and there are some songs that go on too long, and then there's Your Dictionary. And I wouldn't say, I don't know if any of like my, there's not like a whole lot of like super top tier tracks, but I really like the direction they went with this one. And I get why it's highly rated on Rate Your Music. So I guess I'm going to be the defender here, but I appreciated that they tried this out, and I think it worked pretty well. So 8 for Apple Venus Volume 1.
Yeah, I definitely like it a lot more in theory than in practice. It's kind of like you with Oranges and Lemons, right? Where I'm like, I wanted to like this so much, but the songwriting just wasn't there for me. Was that the one that you were saying had like shot up recently on re-listens, or was that another one?
Yeah.
It's that one. Okay, I thought so. My number 4. I'm sticking with 8s for a little bit now, to be honest. I don't really get that high with XTC. It's more that they've got a lot of albums that I really like, rather than a load of albums that I love. But the whole package of the discography was a great experience. My number 4 is English Settlement. Just missing out on a medal, unfortunately. And it was the first album of theirs that I'd ever heard. Actually, it was pretty cool. And yeah, kind of a roller coaster ride with this one, because I feel like every sort of 6 months or so I come back to it, I'm like, oh, can it be a 9? Like, am I just forgetting that there's some really great like hidden tracks on here that I just forget? But I do kind of tend to agree with you in the sense that, it is a little bit excessive in terms of its track list. Um, but the good stuff on here is some of their best stuff. I think Runaways is a nice way to open. But I think Ball and Chain is even better. I think that it's so catchy, really great guitar on it. I really love Senses Working Overtime. I think it's a classic. I do agree the verses are a bit bizarre, but I've kind of grown to love them as I've listened to the song more. Um, I've had kind of an interesting relationship with the song Jason and the Argonauts because the first time I heard it, I wasn't that big on it. It's quite long, it's like 6 minutes. Um, but yeah, I do enjoy it now. Really nice composition, some really dreamy guitar work. And yeah, maybe the compositions from this era, especially, I feel like you need a couple of listens of the songs to really unpack the songs. In some cases, obviously, you have the more immediate pop hits like Senses Working Overtime and Generals and Majors and stuff. But songs like this one, I think a couple of listens and you'll really get a sense of what the song is all about, which I think is cool. No Thugs in Our House is the first real weak moment for me. There's some cool moments, like the synth parts over the bridge are pretty cool. Yacht Dance, I agree, really great. All of a Sudden It's Too Late, always loved that one. Really effortlessly catchy, which is kind of rare for them. Like you said, sometimes it feels like you're going to get this stuck in your head. We insist. Whereas that is sort of like more easy breezy and laid back. Leisure is okay, but it's kind of the outro, like the last minute of the song is incredible. Like the sax solo is so weird, and then there's this really sweet guitar solo as well, which I really enjoy. Yeah, as I mentioned, their music can be quite difficult to digest at times, and the lengths of the albums don't help. And I'm like, I'm enjoying this, but I kind of, when I'm with headphones, I'm just like taking them off my ears for 5 seconds, just because it's like a lot of like strange chord progressions and strange vocal melodies, and it's exciting, but at the same time, it can be a bit overwhelming. So there are definitely points in almost all of their albums where I'm sort of zoning out a little bit because it's all right, they're doing this. Oh, great song. Okay, yeah. And yeah, I agree. Snowman is an amazing closer. I love the lyrics on that one. It's like, yeah, why does she treat me like a snowman? It's like kind of a nice image there. But yeah, really, really cool musically, that song as well. So yeah, it's another 8. I think it was in my top 10 of 1982. Not a year I'm particularly head over heels with, even after doing a full deep dive of the year. But I think this is definitely, of their sort of contemporaries, this sort of jangle pop that they were going for in a lot of places here, which they don't really ever go back to that much because they kind of go all in on the 60s pop. I think it works really nicely on this, and yeah, I thought it might be in with a chance of top 3, but I just re-listened to some of my favorites from this and my number 3, and I kind of decided, no, I think 4 is a good spot for it. So maybe we're both going to be in some trouble not having it in the top 3. But it's largely considered their best album by a lot of people. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting claim to me. Yeah, I feel like most people who hear this album say, "Oh, it's a good album. It's a really good album." But
that's the thing, though.
It's like, hard to really justify the whole thing as a.
Yeah, I think I've said this before, but with like rating sites, albums that are going to get like an 8 out of 10 from most people are going to score really well, even if not many of them go higher, because not many people are going to go lower, right? Like they'll end up really high on these rankings, but it's rare that you hear people say that's my favorite album. Whereas like there are bands that are way more divisive that are going to have loads of 10 out of 10 ratings and loads of 1 out of 10, and then the average is not going to be as high as something that just gets loads of 8s, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon. But yeah,
for sure. All right, so moving on. My number 4, and actually I don't know if my opinion is that different from yours than this, but it's Drums and Wires. And yeah, I kind of agree with most of what you said about it, except for one crucial difference, which is that I think Making Plans for Nigel is one of their best tracks. It was pretty much the track that kind of got me interested in doing this whole listen through. And yeah, it's I understand what you're saying, but I think that's kind of the genius of the song, is kind of how it can kind of get a little bit on your edge and annoying, because it's just, it sounds like the way sometimes when kind of like parents that mean well for you or something kind of like talk to you, and it kind of turns that into this like catchy industrial beat. And that's kind of the magic of new wave. And I think this song really nails that feeling. And it's a great opener. um, and yeah, I think the way that they say Nigel in the song, it's just yeah, it's annoying, but it's annoying that brings a smile to your face, while still being like kind of a really cool like industrial post-punky song. So it does a lot of things really well. Um, Moving right into Helicopter, which is Partridge. He had this early period where he has this kind of quirky, energetic side to him, and it just feels like he's just unstoppable in terms of just plowing through. And I think this song is a great representation of that. I haven't talked about the first album. It has a lot of what I love about the first album in that song. I think there's a light concept on here, maybe with day in day out, kind of talking about the grind of the workday. And it kind of talks about some stuff later, with like Millions and Real by Real and Roads Girl the Globe. You just get a little bit of that sense of they're fitting in with the underground 80s scene, and making kind of a contribution to some of that ideology or whatnot. And I think that it all works together pretty well, like that. When You're Near Me, I have difficulty. I think I previously have mentioned being kind of annoyed by that song, but I think it's grown on me a little bit. Millions is a really cool like exercise in soundscape. Probably I like that one better than anything on like Black Sea. I think it just has such a interesting guitar part, kind of abrasive. That Is the Way has I think like a flugelhorn in it, which makes it pretty interesting. Outside World is kind of fun and punky. And then Scissor Man again has that quirky Partridge that I really like, where he's like he is just totally invested in the oddity of the song, and I love it. Complicated Game, again, I think I may have mentioned to you before, was a little bit over the top for me, but I think going back to it, I think I kind of enjoy that it kind of ends the album on a little bit more noisy side. So yeah, this one's definitely growing for me. I like all the songs a good bit. I just think it's one of those albums where I think the first track is so good that I'm not sure the rest of it compares quite as much. That's kind of how I get what I get out of it. So that's maybe why it's stuck here, but it's grown a little bit. And maybe someday it'll become my number 3, but as for now, it's my number 4 at a strong 8.
Yeah, it's funny how, in terms of album crossover, we haven't had any album at the same spot. We're talking about some different albums here, but in terms of ratings, we're like pretty much the whole way like the same. My number 3 was the one I mentioned to you, being having shot up my ranking, and the biggest surprise of the entire discography being Nonesuch. I think this album absolutely rocks. This is obviously the highest I've placed any of their double albums. And it kind of just came down to, I was listening to this and English Settlement, and I was like, this has less dips for me. And I also think it sounds just as good, which is very surprising after the kind of sonic misstep that Oranges and Lemons was. I think this sounds really great. Again, like almost every XTC album, the opening few tracks are among the best on the album. Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead is so fun. I love, again, the harmonica is really great. Whenever they use it very sparingly, that instrument, but when they do, it's always quite a euphoric instrument for them to use. It feels like a release of energy. I'm a big fan of My Bird Performs. It's one of my favorite Colin tracks. I love the horn parts. I almost saw it as like a sequel to Mayor of Simpleton in terms of its sort of thematic stuff. I know Mayor of Simpleton was Andy's song, but I'll get into that more later, don't worry. And then I really also like Dear Madam Barnum. I think that's just such a sing-along song, great sharp acoustic guitar. And you get Humble Daisy, which I think is a really welcome stripping back of the sort of the bombast of the first three songs, or at least Peter Pumpkinhead and Dear Madam Barnum. Again, really cool guitar in the outro, which makes me want to listen to the song again and again. I love the Smartest Monkeys. I think that is the most like, you know, Blur-esque song that they did. Especially that opening guitar effect as it like phases from ear to ear is just almost identical to the opening of Tracy Jacks. So maybe Graham Coxon heard that song and was just like, "Yep, taking that," which is fine. You know, that's kind of what makes great music, is taking elements from all your influences and making this sort of new sound. And I think they've really just found a new creative agency here. The songs feel like the best XTC songs feel unpredictable, but not in an annoying way. Where like sometimes they can have songs that are unpredictable, but you're just like, oh, can we just have like something more straightforward? But I think they really nail the balance here. I think The Disappointed continues this really great start to the album. Holly Up on Poppy is pretty much ear candy for me. I think it sounds great. I think you said Crocodile wasn't one you liked that much. I agree. It's the first dud of the album for me. I think Rook is quite cool. I think how the piano starts off almost like Pyramid Song-esque in the verses and then just becomes way more complex as the song evolves, which I think is really cool, really unique. Omnibus is quite a bizarre song, very cheesy, but I kind of like it a lot. So yeah, That Wave has a cool psychedelic flavor. I'm just naming all the songs because I think a lot of them are really good. Like there aren't that many duds. I Agree, Then She Appeared, for a song that's like the 12th song on a 90s XTC album. It's way better than it has any right to be. It's so good. War Dance, Wrapped in Grey, The Ugly Underneath are like pleasant in the album context, but not, you know, amazing. I actually really like Bungalow. I actually disagree with you. I think Colin's songs on this are really good. I think Bungalow is quite Bowie-esque, and also Ray Davis-esque in how it paints a picture of English life really well, which again, they did a lot. Yeah, Books of Burning closes the album nicely. I just think, yeah, it's just really strong. Like the production's really nice. Again, it's not like I would, you know, there's probably 2 or 3 tracks I could lose, you know, which is less than on English Settlement. But I still think the undertaking of listening to it in full is a bit overwhelming, even as someone who really likes the album. So I can't put it higher than an 8 for that reason, just because even though if it was like 45 minutes, it would be amazing. And as you may have deducted, my top 2 albums are not double albums, so you kind of see where my thinking was there. But yeah, Nonesuch, I think I've seen a lot of very low ratings for it from people that we are associated with on the Discord. So I don't really get that. I think it's really strong, especially compared to the albums around it. Yeah, really like Nonesuch.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you like it so much. I think I can see the perspective for sure. I think I sort of predicted that would be the one that was rising up for you.
Nice.
It's like,
good job.
It's not going to be Apple Venus one for you. So yeah, and I think it's interesting too. We both have Nonesuch about the same level above Oranges and Lemons.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think it's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just I was enjoying that sort of 60s pop bombast a bit more, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get back on track here. So I've got 3 left, and what are they? So going all the way back from my number 3 to the debut, White Music, and this is an album that is not generally beloved, I think, for whatever reason, but on maybe not listen number 1, but on listen number 2, I was just totally digging this album. Very different sound from this period. It's that new wave. It's a bit quirky. It's not really got that like refined post-punky sound yet, so it is a little bit in the vein of like the Cars or something along those lines. And I have a mixed relationship with new wave. So I don't know why this one just really seems to work for me, but the number one thing about this album is it has so much energy. I feel like it's one of the most energetic albums I've ever heard, next to albums like My Generation by The Who, as well as maybe a couple of the early Jam albums that just feel like they just start out of the gate with just tons and tons and tons of, rockin' energy, and just don't really let up, except for a couple places, which I will admit. But just starting out right on track one, and I think Partridge here, for whatever reason, I just think he was crafting really, really great poppy hooks, short, but just really, really, catchy. And yeah, Radios in Motion is just such a great, cool start. It reminds me a lot. There's indie rock band called Parquet Courts, and they feel like that's really, they took that style from this song, Radios in Motion. I'm not quite, there might be other stuff in this period that also has the same kind of energy, but he's trying to like intentionally make like a hit in America or something with the lyrics, and but I don't think it worked, but I love it. I think it's just got it's got that perfect mix of like, you don't know whether it's serious or silly, and I think it's a really cool way to start. And then it just goes straight into Crosswire, which I get why you don't like it, but for me it's just like, whoa, it just hits you and it's all over the place, and I just don't even know what's happening. I just love that it's like taking me on a roller coaster right into This Is Pop, which I think is a really cool, fun track. I think the chorus is so catchy. I'm saying catchy a lot, but it's just what this band is like. They're really good at writing catchy stuff. The verses are kind of like more dissonant, but for whatever reason, I like the contrast and kind of how the chorus kind of like surprises you and like out of that verse context. A really cool one. And then a really short one by Molding, and then you get Statues of Liberty, which kind of has like a pub rock type feel, but I feel like it's just the chorus is a really
that one almost reminds me of Elvis Costello. Now that you pub rock.
I'm not as big on Costello as some people, but I feel like it does have his style for sure, and this one definitely really works for me. All on the Watchtower, the cover, it's not a great cover, which, like, why am I saying that my number 3? It's like, well, you've got 5 really, really high octane tracks, and this one is just kind of like taking a break, hear us kind of like jump around for a little bit, and then it goes right back into it with Into the Atom Age, where again it's like it's kind of like evoking like the 50s or something like that, and kind of like again very, very quirky, and the Machinzette, it's just goofball, fun, and then moving into I'll Set Myself on Fire, which is a early Colin Moulding track, and he didn't have quite as much of the like melodic sensibilities here that he had later on, but I really like that song. It's perfect, like it's a combusting of all this energy they've been building up throughout the album, and he sounds kind of like demonic and crazy on it. And there's a part especially near the end where it kind of like dials back a little bit, and they kind of just repeat, set myself, I set myself, I set, and it's just, I feel like the soundscape of that track too may have been like slightly influential to Making Plans for Nigel later as well. So I can hear where that kind of early style Colin Moulding is coming from. And then you get the other weak track, which is I'm Bugged, which is again like I'm kind of okay with it just because it's a cool down. And then a few tracks at the end, probably not as strong as the others, but Newtown Animal and The Furnished Cage is still got plenty of hooks in it. Neon Shuffle and Spinning Top. It's just if you're into just music that just will just totally take you all over, and you'll make you kind of like lose your brain a little bit. This is, for whatever reason, it's hitting a sweet spot for me. And I just would rather listen to it than a lot of this other stuff, just because I think it works so well. I'm not denying that those 2 tracks I mentioned are a bit weaker, but I still love it. So I've got it at a light 9.
Very nice, very nice. It's cool that you mentioned, is it Parquet Courts or Parquet Courts?
Right.
But I know like 3 songs from them, and I've been meaning to get into them, and maybe I should give White Music another shot. You kind of convinced me a little bit there. It's definitely not as much of a time commitment as some of their other albums.
No.
My number 2 is Black Sea. I'm not even going to pretend to leave suspense. Zach knows what my number 1 is going to be. And Black Sea was one that just slowly kept creeping up. It wasn't like None Such where it just straight away, like just it was sort of went a bit more under the radar because I kind of knew it was great. And it's still a strong 8 for me. I don't quite get it to a 9 just because, yeah, it just feels a bit imbalanced between like the atmospheric sort of high highs that it's got to some tracks, which is not true of my number one. I think again, as all their albums do, opens incredibly with the first few tracks. I think Respectable Street, those lyrics are amazing. Like it's so one of my favorite songs of theirs lyrically. Which yeah, again I'll get to later, but it never really feels messy. Like I said, it's their best when they're unpredictable, but it feels natural at the same time within their songs. And the same could be said about Generals and Majors, which actually the first time I listened to it, I was like, it's okay. I don't think it hit me sort of straight away, but a few listens in, I was like, oh yeah, this is the stuff. It's the perfect song to follow up the opener, really. And then that acoustic guitar that comes in is so unusual for the song. You're not expecting it at all, and it works so well. I get what you're saying about living through another Cuba. I just think the groove is so infectious, and I do think the hook is really catchy. I think it's just a really like danceable song. Love at First Sight, that riff, oh my god, it's so good. And No Language in Our Lungs, also really great. So it's quite front loaded, I would say. The album, there's some not so great tracks on the back half, but the standouts on the back half for me are Towers of London, which has some nice hooks scattered throughout the song, really great guitar. And the first time I listened to it, this is my favorite song on the album, Burning with Optimism's Flames, which it isn't anymore, but I still think it's a real highlight of the album. I just think it's so good. Sort of similar to When You're Near Me, I Have Difficulty, in the sense that the hook is just in your face. It's like you can't escape it. It's like it's really catchy, but he's like shouting it at you, like you cannot escape this catchy song. Travels in Nihilon, Nylon. Just sort of cool atmosphere, I guess, but not really an inspiring closer. Like I don't think it adds much to the album experience as a closer, but yeah, I mean, there's no bad songs. There's just sort of 3 or so on the back half, which I think are a bit weak. But I like 42 minutes or something. It's a pretty good length, and I think the high points on it are among the best of their career. But as much as I do really like XTC, I think the gap between 1 and 2 is the biggest gap of any 2 albums on my list. So yeah, really like Black Sea though. I think it's definitely worth a listen. And I think it's cool how they blend this like energetic post-punk with the more pop leanings, which are definitely coming through on songs like Respectable Street and Generals and Majors, especially. So yeah, great grooves, great hooks, great sounding album, very cool. Black Sea, strong 8, strong 8.
All right, it's interesting. You always talk about it like it's not your number 2, but not that I don't hear plenty of admiration, but
yeah, it's tough. Like I said, with all these like 2 through 7, I like them all, but I have like issues with all of them. Really, it just drag them down, and it's sad because this kind of format of just ranking the albums doesn't really reflect how much I enjoy listening to XTC, because I do, but just because there aren't that many super high scores, it kind of looks like I don't. But on every album, pretty much there's songs that I love.
I definitely get that. And, we're talking about album lengths as a big contributing factor. It seems like I tend to like longer albums if they can keep up the quality. I think the issue with some XTC albums is they kind of don't, but
and a lack of variety at times as well, I think.
It seems like you maybe value a shorter album, even if a longer album has plenty of good songs. You may still prefer the shorter album.
Yeah. I guess it depends. I think I do like a double album, but my thing with a double album is that if you're going to do a double album, either make it like a quadrophenia, like an insane concept album, or a white album where it's like genres going all over the place. You're doing everything that you would like to experiment with. And I just think sometimes, like English Settlement, they kind of experiment with a few different things, but it is still a very coherent sound, and it's a lot of that same sound for a long time. It's kind of my thinking with it, but yeah.
Nice. Okay. And number two is a album you also had pretty high, much to my happiness. It is Mummer, and yeah, I just this album doesn't get a lot of. It's not really talked about much at all. Like it was hard to even know what to expect going into it. But you know, I think that part of it is that it does take a few listens. It's a more subdued set of material for them, and so you know, your first listen you might be like, okay, like that seemed fine, but it takes some time to let it sink in, and when it sinks in, I think it really does sink in. Opens with a Beating of Hearts, which is a little bit of those Eastern elements that they taken on some of these tracks, and I like how this one does it, where the verses are kind of strange and unsettling, but then it kind of centers around this, like, is the wonderful beating of hearts, and it's just a nice way to open, I think. Then moving into Wonderland, which is a really nice soundscape from Colin Moulding, kind of, you know, dreamy and atmospheric, really pretty one. Then Love on a Farm Boy's Rages. I think this is kind of like one of the, if I had to like name a prototypical XTC song, it may be this one, because I think Partridge kind of tried to do this kind of style where a little bit later with a couple other songs, but I think he really nails it here, where it's just sort of saying like, all I do well is here on the farm, and is that enough? Can I actually live the life I want to? It's a really interesting perspective, and it's the sound of it is kind of relaxed, a little bit like English Settlement probably was a inspiration to this sound, but just really lovely to listen to, but still plenty of like jangly guitar in the chorus. Yeah, and you know, it starts to feel a little of that 60s Beatles sound or something like that. So really love that one. Then Great Fire has use of the orchestra in the chorus parts, and it wasn't one of my favorites at first, but it rose for me. I enjoy it too. Deliver Us from the Elements is kind of haunting and mysterious, and I like it. I don't know if I have that much else to say about it, but Human Alchemy is, I definitely get what you're saying on it. This is a song that I think if one instrument was removed, I would not like the song. And it took me a while to even figure out what this instrument is that just made me go back to it and think, oh, wow, that's really cool. And I finally figured it out. It's sleigh bells. After the part where they're like, a human alchemy, you hear this like, shh. And it kind of like brings a shiver in my body a little bit. It's you know, it's kind of a political song, but it's just kind of chanty and drony, and yeah, just it's so unique. I kind of dig it. Lady Bird is jazzy, but in a really kind of forlorn way. Reminds me of some early Jethro Tull texts, maybe a little bit. Just yeah, I like the little bit more relaxed, depressive sound or something sometimes, and I think they do it really well here. In Loving Memory of a Name is a really, really beautiful track. It's such a simple statement of just like, you know, standing by a grave and thinking about how this person served their country, or you know, maybe it's not like a patriotic song. It's more of like you can imagine yourself being there and like kind of daydreaming about this stuff. So it's really about that, and it's a really interesting take. It makes me feel youthful, maybe. I say this as a 29-year-old, but yeah, really, really cool one. And then it ends with Me and the Wind is maybe the most forgettable track on it for me, but Funk Papa Roll, that track still continues, kind of the texture of the album plenty for me. Funk Papa Roll kind of goes back to their quirky early sound, and it's kind of a fun way to end because, you know, makes it a little pop out a little bit. So yeah, I was really surprised at how consistent this one was. You know, I like this middle era where they have this more melodic side, and I think a lot of that's showing. A lot of their use of orchestration is showing. You know, I would say a couple of the songs are a little slightly weaker, but I enjoy everything quite a lot, with a couple of really strong songs, and that makes it a 9 for me.
Yeah, great. Which means, as expected by us, I don't know about viewers, depends who they are and how much they've spoken to us about XTC. Double number one, Skylarking.
The only matchup.
The only matchup on the entire list, yeah. And I think it makes sense. It's kind of what brings what you want from XTC and what I want from XTC together. I've got this as a very, very, very strong 9. I listened to it a few times again to try and see if I could just unlock it a little bit more to get it to a 10. But yeah, we'll get into my reasoning. I think the production is immediately a step up from anything they'd ever done before. Like immediately you can tell that Todd Rundgren got in there, like bashed their heads together and kind of just was like, we're going to rein it in. We're going to sort of, like I think I mentioned earlier, just sort of have everything that's there needs to be there. And every instrument that comes in, every element that changes, you notice it and you're given time to process it, which sounds like a very simple thing, but the XTC didn't really understand that on some of their albums. And yeah, I think, again, the opening is incredible. The whole A side is just 11 out of 10, like unbelievable pop songwriting. Summer's Cauldron, one of my favorites. The percussive bird song is so cool. The Here I'm Found floating round and round like a bug in brandy in this big bronze cup. Yeah, it's like the mix of alliteration and cool rhyming schemes, but also makes it very catchy. And then the transition into Grass is just one of the best moments, maybe the best moment in the entire discography, where the first notes of Grass come in, and it's like, oh my god, again this Eastern sound, but it's not too overt. It's really sweet and catchy, touches on nostalgia better than almost any song that they ever did. Almost moved me to tears on the listen that I went through for this project, because I had heard it before, and I think I unlocked this album a bit more with this sort of us going through all the albums. And the Birdsong returns to lead us right into the meeting place. Another great Colin track. The riff is amazing, very simple, which I like. I think that really benefits them on this album. That's really Super Girl, also amazing. More a bit quirkier, which I think, you know, I'm happy for them to show off a bit more of a quirky side, especially lyrically. God, the production on the track is so top notch, and my favorite guitar solo in the entire discography. It's like 20 seconds long, but it kind of reminds me of like Nels Cline from Wilco in that sort of like crazy jazzy guitar. Really cool. And then you get the sort of the trilogy, I guess. Ballet for a Rainy Day kicks that off. So good. And then how the slow descending grey line leads straight into the darker sounding Thousand Umbrellas is really cool. Great strings. Probably my least favorite on the A side, but I love how it works in this sort of sequence of 3. And Season Cycle, my oh my, what a great song that is. That is just amazing. So Paul McCartney. So fun, great keys, great melody. And then yeah, the B-side also starts really strong with Earn Enough for Us, which is pretty much a perfect pop song. Great lyrics commenting on sort of capitalism and stuff, which is really interesting. It's sort of the thing that they would do quite a bit, sort of the working class and that kind of thing. Big Day was one I wasn't too big on at first, but I actually really like it now. It's a Colin track as well. I think there's more of a ratio of Colin tracks on this album than any other album, which definitely helps it. Another Satellite, cool spacey vibes. Mermaid Smile I really like. Man Who Sailed Around Soul has this sort of like spy movie vibe to it. Yeah, I just think that the B side, it's a tall order, but it doesn't live up to the A side for me. There's like these songs are good, but yeah, I can never help but feel like it's a come down after the excellence of the A side. It's still great. The B side is still great. This is like a top 100 album of all time for me. But yeah, I just think that if the B side were on the same level as the A side, it would be even higher on that list. I think it's an excellent listen. I quite like Dear God as the closer on streaming. I know it's sort of a divisive track. I'm sure you're going to have your say on it, but I don't factor that into my score really. But yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah, album grows on me each time. It might have reached a point now where it's like right on the 10 borderline, and that's where it's going to stay. But maybe one day I'll get it to the full marks. But definitely some 10 out of 10 material all throughout the album. So maybe one day I'll just be less strict with my rating system and just loosen up a bit and give it that full score. But it's easily the best XTC album. Not even close.
Yeah, I had never heard this album before. I'd seen it at the top of all the lists, and I was kind of confused. Like, well, it seems like the early part of the discography is the one that's highly thought of, and then so why is this random album in the middle? And it's very easy to understand why. It's so well produced. Yes, Todd does such a great job here, Todd Rundgren. I think he always does a great job producing. I'm not saying I love every single album he's produced, but this one, because it's paired with such great songwriting, and I think he does the job. He balances Partridge as a creative, leader of the band to try to reach some kind of meeting ground, and I think they really make it here. This one feels it's not really like a concept album by any means, but I feel like it works better than something like The Big Express. It's like kind of going from this atmosphere of like youthful innocence at the beginning, and the end there's kind of like disillusionment, and then finally like death and rebirth, and everything it's not overbearing at all. It's a very like light kind of, you don't really need to think about it even, but it's just kind of pleasantly there if you're interested, if that makes any sense. And of course I'll just probably reassert a lot of what you said, but yeah, the opening one too of Summer's Cauldron, it's got that like pastoral feel, a little bit like Talk Talk, and it's even like shorter and crisper, and I love the idea of it as kind of like being both completely content, but also hearing lyrics like please don't get me out, I'm relaxed in the undertow. It's kind of feeling like almost, I don't know, not necessarily druggy, but it could be that or something like that, where you're kind of in this like haze of illusion or something along those lines, and then bursting into Grass. I think that was all Rundgren's idea of how to connect those two songs. But yeah, really, really amazing transition to a song that's kind of thinking about, as you said, Colin Moulding's youth or something along those lines. And then The Meeting Place, which I will go more into that in my top 20 songs, but this is an amazing song. I love the kind of hook on it, which feels a little bit like industrial or factory-like, mixed with these kind of like lyrics about first love or something along those lines. But feeling the need to hide it, kind of the tension between work and love, it really captures that well. That's really Supergirl. Is great. It's like you don't hear that much of the quirky Partridge on here, but he really shows up here, and it just works perfectly. It's exactly what you need at this moment. You get three songs that are a little bit more directly imitative of the 60s sounds. Ballet for a Rainy Day is probably my favorite of the three. It's really pretty. It's interesting when I finish Oranges and Lemons on streaming, sometimes it goes straight into another song. It's this one because it actually has the lyrics Oranges and Lemons in this song, and I keep hearing it's like, wow, like this is how good they can sound, A Thousand Umbrellas has to me, that one is the most McCartney one. It just feels very Sgt. Peppery. And then Season Cycle, kind of mixing that Beatles sound with Beach Boys Smile type sound. Very cool song. Second side, Earn Enough for Us, as you said, just great songcraft. Big Day, kind of, I like it. It's a little bit of like a challenge to what they've been building up, and I think I wouldn't want it off the album because it's because I think some people consider this like the weakest one or something. I don't even know if I would consider it that, but I think it raises the tension a little bit. Like, are you really prepared for this wedding? Kind of thing. It's but so subtle. Another Satellite, kind of continuing with that, where it's a little bit more atmospheric, and it's a little bit like the idea of maybe, I don't know, I envision it as like starting an affair or something like that, and that's kind of just popping in and out. It's like bouncing around. Mermaid Smiled, just great use of orchestration and instruments. Man Who Sailed Around His Soul, just a really interesting take on kind of like a Nature Boy or Yes Bondish type song. Dying is a really it's kind of risen for me. I think it really hits you the way that Molden kind of talks about kind of observing this person and saying, I don't want to die like you, but there's this kind of a sadness to it, maybe realizing that that may be his fate. And it's kind of a powerful transition to a Sacrificial Bonfire, which is, it's interesting. I don't know, it's not on my top 20 songs, but I think it's just the perfect ending. I think it's a really, really great wrap up to this. And I don't think I could envision it any other way. I love the strings kind of building up at the end. Dear God is not a song I dislike by any means, but I'm happy they left it off the album. I think it's kind of strange if it was on the album to start with a kid singing. It feels more direct and more of a statement. And I think it's a good statement. I mean, I know XTC makes a lot of more questionable political statements, but this one I think worked well. I think you can feel it's an expression, very direct transmission from Partridge. And so I like it. And it's one of the most famous XTC songs. I don't quite get the overwhelming amount of praise for it, but
I don't think it fits with the album, but
yeah, I'm glad.
Really well as a standalone single for sure.
Yeah, I think Partridge took it off at the very end and maybe regretted it or something, but I think his instinct was correct. Like it was, I think it works as a standalone single. I think it's meant for that. So that's my stance on that.
Nice, and that's a 10 for you, is it?
Oh yeah, it's a 10. So let me kind of go into, I think I sort of forgot to close it off there, but yeah, I have listened to this album so many times since hearing it for the first time. We'll go into different albums. I feel like I listened to a new XTC album and I'll listen to Skylark and I'll listen to another new one and I'll listen to, it's just amazing how easy it is to listen to this album. I feel like even people that are fans of like just 60s music or something could really enjoy this album. It's just so packed with melody and inventiveness, and I can totally see exactly. It feels like a perfectly done concept. There's no weak tracks. I think it's just a brilliant set of music. I don't know if it's top 20 albums of all time or anything quite like that high, because I'm not saying that I don't think that there aren't albums out there that hit it, have an even stronger set of track lists, but this one is just, there's very little, if anything, that I can really criticize about it, and that's why it gets to 10 for me.
Yeah. Hopefully one day I'll join you there. I really do think, like, not just people who are fans of 60s music, but people who are fans of any kind of music. Like, it's just the most accessible, like you said, easy listen. People who are fans of 80s pop as well. Like, I think it works for anybody.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you're really like exclusively a metalhead or something like that, it might not be your favorite album, but I still think you would listen to it and be like, oh, that was fine. Like it's hard to imagine somebody being like, this is a bad album. Like, yeah. Really hard to imagine.
Which I can see with a lot of these, even the ones I liked. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
They're a mixed bag elsewhere. But.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I even found it so difficult to rank them, but we did it. Thank you for joining me, Zach. We're gonna have.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We just figured we may as well do the video since we'd already listened to all the albums. It felt like it'd be a waste not to. So we've got the top 20 songs coming. This video has been very long, and I know that Harry Nilsson has just come out recently. So if you want to watch it, well, I guess it's too late to say it now. If you want to watch it in parts, but it's okay. And yeah, there'll be some shorter discographies coming up to sort of manage this sort of massive video length that we've been acquiring lately. But I think it's cool to sort of maximize the discussion on some of these albums, especially albums like Mama and White Music, which we sort of have interesting connections with that don't really get talked about at all.
Yeah,
ever.
Or non-such a lot. So we both have our albums that we're championing a little bit, and I just think this is a band that does deserve this very deep dive because they do have a lot of different transitions, and I feel like they are slightly misunderstood in the general critical consensus, and so I think this is fun to do this and get out the results of this little experiment to the
Yeah. So thank you very much for watching, and catch us for the songs video.